Dear brothers and sisters, right now I want to explain to you the Jewish position on the concept of polygamy, meaning having more than one wife. So according to Torah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with polygamy, meaning the Torah allowed it. In fact, our ancestors, like Abraham, peace be upon him, had two wives, Sarah and Hagar. Yaakov, peace be upon him, had four wives, and so on. So from the Torah perspective, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a man having more than one wife. In fact, there's no limit to how many wives a regular Jew can have. However, the rabbis made a recommendation, which is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, that a man should not have, it's recommended, not to have more than four wives. But from the Torah perspective, there's really no limit, except for a king. A king, the Torah did make a limit, and it's brought down in the oral Torah, in the Talmud, that a king is not allowed to have more than 18 wives. 18 is the maximum. Now, with that said, Jews having, without a limit, king having 18, with all that said, there are conditions that have to be met. And the conditions are that a person who wishes to have more than one wife has to have the ability to support each wife. He has to be able to provide food, clothing, and independent shelter. So, for example, if a man has, let's say, two wives, he cannot force them to live together. He has to provide a house for each one. And this is the condition. And in fact, some of the women watching this video may kind of automatically say, oh, maybe this is like anti-feminist, that the Torah allows this. But in reality, it's not. This law came from God, and God knows what's best, and He knows us, His creation, physically, and He knows us emotionally. So therefore, if God decided that this is the best option, then this is got to be the best option. Now, women that, for example, before they get married, they can set a condition. They can set a condition that their husband, or future husband in this case, will not get an additional wife. So there is that option for those that can never imagine themselves having a husband that is married to another woman also at the same time. They can make that condition before they get married. In fact, that's what my wife did. In our marriage contract, which what we call ketubah, it says over there that I will not get myself another wife unless she agrees or unless the Beit Din allows it. The Beit Din is the court, the Jewish court. So, those women that are really do not want a husband having more than one wife, then they can set that condition. Now, also I should mention that in Europe, about 1,000 years ago, now if some Jewish history, that Jews did not always live in Europe. Some of the Jews began settling Europe probably around Roman times, when the Romans conquered the land of Israel and enslaved some of the Jews and brought them back to Rome. Some of the Jews settled throughout Europe. Not all the Jews. Some of the Jews that were in Babylon even before the Romans. This was the first exile, when the king Nebuchadnezzar exiled, and King Sennacherib, even before that, exiled some of the tribes to Babylon in those areas. But during Roman times, Jews, the majority of Jews today that are in Europe or from Europe, they were settled there by the Romans. And in Europe, about 1,000 years ago, there lived a rabbi. His name was Rabbeinu Gershom, who made a decree upon his community. And decree was that a man should not have more than one wife. And this decree that he made had an expiration date. and the expiration date was 1,000 years after the decree was issued. And interestingly, that this expiration date already expired in about 1970s. And so technically, now before the expiration date, by the way, let's say 100 years ago in Europe, if a Jew got himself more than one wife, then he would actually be not violating the Torah law, because the Torah never prohibited, but he would be violating a rabbinical decree, which is also a problem, because the Torah tells us to follow the rabbis. So for a European Jew living 100 years ago to get himself more than one wife would be a violation of the Torah, meaning that he did not listen to the rabbis. That's really the main issue, not the prohibition of polygamy, because polygamy is not forbidden from the Torah. But anyways, so after 1970s, this decree expired. So now technically, even the European Jews are allowed to have more than one wife. However, since this has been the custom for such a long time, right now they're not, eager to do it, and they're kind of, I think, in this kind of a suspense that, they've been practicing certain thing for a while, and now, even though it's already annulled, they're not used to this thing. But, who knows, things may change, a little bit into the future. But for other Jews that are not from Europe, this has never been the problem, getting more than one wife. And in Israel, since Israel is not a religious country, right now there is a law that you cannot have more than one wife, but that's really only because Israel is not a religious state, and they got these laws from, I think, Britain, that, occupied Israel before the Jews came back. And so a lot of these laws have nothing to do with Judaism. And in fact, there are some religious groups in Israel today that are fighting to try to re-establish polygamy. Now, one more thing I wanted to mention is that some of the viewers watching, some of the feminists may think, oh, the Torah is so anti-feminist. How can one man have more than one wife? And why not a woman can have more than one husband? And, the truth is that this law came from God. And since God created us, He knows what's best. He knows our psychology. He knows our physics. And therefore, if God decided that a man is able to handle more than one wife, psychologically, physically, whatever it may be, then there is no problem with that. This is God's law. So if you have an issue, you can ask God, why did He decide to do it this way? But in reality, there are some laws that are actually on the women's side. There are some Torah laws that is on a woman, that takes the side of the woman. For example, according to the Torah, if a woman says to her husband, I don't want to work, I want to sit at home, and you're supposed to feed me, clothe me, and provide everything for me, and I don't want to work, she has all the right to do so. Because according to the Torah, it's the husband's job to provide for his wife. But a husband can never say that. If a husband sits at home and says to his wife, you work, and I'm going to sit at home and you provide for me, then he's violating the Torah. So we see in this case, the Torah is on the women's side. So, in my opinion, the Torah is really the most feminist book out there. But what the Torah does is basically it recognizes that there is a difference between men and women. Not to say that one is less than the other one. I'm not saying that. But there is a difference. Just like, a woman can give birth and a man cannot be. There's a physical difference. There are other differences as well. There are psychological differences, emotional differences. So God is the creator and He knows what's best, and this is the way He created the world, that a man can have more than one wife, but a woman cannot have more than one husband. And by the way, in addition to a wife, a Torah also allows what's called a concubine. A concubine is basically like a wife, but just with lesser rights. And there is such a thing too. I hope this explains the Jewish position, and thank you for watching.